Okay, good morning. We've been talking about loosely. We've been talking about the illness and pandemic and that type of topics. I wanted to start talking today about Rabbi Eiger. Rabbi Eiger has a lot to offer in the topic of pandemics and public health policy. He was probably the Gadol Hadar during 1831 when the cholera epidemic broke out through big portions of Europe, Poland and Lithuania and Russia, etc. And because of that, he has a lot he wrote a lot, he spoke a lot, what he said has been discussed a lot. And I want to get to Rabbi Eiger's public policy in regards to cholera. But I really just want to start first, and this will probably take us all of this week, and the next week we'll continue on to the next part of it, with Rabbi Eiger's relationship with the mitzvah Bikkur Cholim. I was trying to find a different word. It's a very, very intense relationship. Rabbi Eiger had like a very special bond with the mitzvah Bikkur Cholim. I want to talk about that and some of the pratim that arise from his anhaga, and then we'll move on to his actual contribution during the time of pandemic. Rabbi Eiger is actually the first, probably, at least that I know of, the first Rav or Rosh Yeshiva or whatever who opened a hospital. Before Kloisenberg, before others, the Rabbi Eiger is the first one to open a hospital, a very nice hospital. But we'll get to all that in Mitzvah Shem. Now, I really just wanted to start with a little description that was written in I think it was a German paper, probably even slightly Haskalic leaning, but it's like a little biographical sketch about Rabbi Eiger. I want to just read it because it's a beautiful, like flavorful piece that describes it. Obviously, it's l'maiser for anybody who learned in yeshivas. You don't need me to describe to you who Rabbi Eiger is and what Rabbi Eiger's contribution is, and his legacy. The legend of Rabbi Eiger, lives on its own. Suffice to say, I'll just mention that Rav Chaim Soloveitchik, who's the mechadish of the Derech Halimud of the Elim Yeshivas today, who saw himself as like a bak koyach of Rabbi Eiger, said that Rabbi Eiger has something unique that almost none of the other achronim have. He says Rabbi Eiger never says a krum svara. You don't have to agree with every outcome he says. You don't have to like every kasha. You could think sometimes the teretz is not the teretz you would have said. There's no krum svara. Everything's a glat svara except for 3 examples that he gave. And one of them he says is shver from a svara, one shver from a mishnah, and one shver from a Rambam, I think. I only know one of them by heart, but it's look-upable, and that really could be a share on its own, going through those 3 things that Rav Chaim had Bikaris and Rabbi Eiger. The truth is, the one that I remember is Rabbi Eiger has a very strange shaila about a person who's together with his pregnant wife. If it's Baal, Al Ishtay, it's like a whole strange shaila. But the truth is, if you look in the tshuva that Rabbi Eiger is writing, it's written to his son Rabbi Shlomo Eiger, and he says, "Here's a cute shaila. Ask it to the Einiklach and see what they say, and report back to me what they say." And in the tshuva that Rabbi Shlomo Eiger sends him, he sends back the tshuva that 3 of the Einiklach said. Rabbi Leibel Eiger's there, and 2 of his brothers. A cousin and a brother sends back the chuvas, and Rabbi Eiger is mefalpel with the kids to root him. So, to be honest, Rabbi Eiger wasn't a echte shaila. It was Rabbi Eiger. It was Rabbi Eiger when he was wearing his Zaydi hat. He was writing to his Einiklach, and he was asking, being mefalpel with them. But Rabbi Eiger's rather his personal letters are fascinating. He was an extremely warm person. The letter that he wrote after his wife was nifteres, his niftera is a beautiful, beautiful letter. The letters he writes to his children are beautiful. To his daughters, Rabbi Eiger is a very, very warm person. But I want to read you this page-long description of Rabbi Eiger and his schedule. This is I don't know who this writer is. Even he says as follows: I can't stop talking. I want to describe to you the love-inducing person that Rabbi Eiger was. He says, he was short. He had a very big head, a large head, in every way. Rabbi Eiger had a large head. His piercing blue eyes were burning. His piercing blue eyes. His forehead was how do you say it? Furrowed. His brow was furrowed. Gavaya v'rachav was tall and wide. He had a large head, a broad forehead. Tavei panav shikvu ritzinus v'kavod. His whole facial expression gave off intensity and seriousness. Al svasavay nasa chiach mo'osher. He always had a slight hint of a smile on his face. Liitim alavim b'min etzev matok. Ba'ifin klali shikvu panav atzaris cholsha. His face generally looked famatat. He looked tired. Generally, he looked peaceful, happy, but tired. Savul charish. And he goes into more detail. Then he tells you about a little bit over here. He says, "Ulam be'es mesiras shir, hayamukutav v'kalosh." When he would say shir, interesting. Rabbi Eiger was not a great maggid shir. Rabbi Eiger was known. He's a famed Rosh Yeshiva. Rabbi Eiger had a yeshiva in Friedland for 24 years, and then in Posen for 23 years. He's a famed Rosh Yeshiva. He has shiurim on all the Masechtas, right? We know Rabbi Eiger as a Yeshiva. Says he was Mekuta v'Kalosh, Af Lebar b'Shel Miftaya Hungary, Kach Shel Tamidim Chadash Miskashu Lahavanais B'Tchila. He was like, he spoke very softly. He actually, like when I think of like a Rusher. Like he spoke like softly and abruptly. And because of his Hungarian accent, Rabbi Eiger was born in Mattersdorf in Hungary, and he was Yeshiva in Yakisha lands, like in Austria, in Poland, wherever. So the Eilim didn't really understand his words that well. So in the beginning, it would take a new Talmud some time to learn Rabbi Eiger's Sprach. Then he tells you a little bit about his schedule, he says. Al af sheshachav lishan rak samach l'chatzos halayla. Even though Rabbi Eiger first went to sleep at 12 o'clock, he starts backwards. He starts from bedtime. Rabbi Eiger went to sleep at 12 o'clock. Hishkim Rabbi Eiger lakim mitase b'shas arba b'Bikkur. We get up at 4 in the morning. Achech lamad mishnah ad l'shas sheish. He would learn Mishnayos until 6 a.m. That was 4 to 6 was Mishnayos. 6 till 7 he would give a share to a few balabatim. I guess like a group of balabatim that would come for a share. 7 until 8 was shachris. 8 until 9, he would eat breakfast with his wife and his children. That was the meal that Rabbi Eiger shared with his family. That's the hour that he saw his family. From what is it, 8 to 9? 8 to 9, right? I think 8 to 9, 9 to 10? 8 to 9. 8 to 9. He would sit with his family, his wife and his children. He would eat breakfast with them. That was his meal that he had with his family. He says what his meal was. It was coffee without sugar, fine, a little refresh, whatever he writes with his meals. Then he says from 9 until 10 he would learn Tanakh. From 10 until 11 he would say Shir. From 12 until 1 he would Chazar and Alumad Mimei fine. Then he would have lunch with the open sefer, he says. He would have a little soup by the table with an open sefer. Then he continues on. Then he would write for 2 hours. And he said the pen would fly across the paper. You couldn't even tell when it was coming down between letter to letter, word to word. The pen would fly across the paper. Like we know, he was a prolific tshuva writer, right? A prolific writer. He would write letters. Then he would go between 2 and 4. He would go to the Bezdin house or to the Rashi Kahal, whatever needed to be attended to, and he would deal with either Piskei Bezdin or Tzarchi Tzibur. Then when he would come home, B'shuva me yeshiva sanal shasakais yayin, he would have a small cup of wine. Doesn't say what type of wine, schnapps, whatever. He would have a small glass of wine. And then after that, so this is like late afternoon, he would come home after Bezdin, take a little refreshments, and then he would go out on the road to do Nicham Avelim and Bikkur Cholim, Believe Hashem Shel Chaver Kadisha. This is part of his daily schedule. Every day he would go out to do this. Aleinu Lahaskir, he says, the writer, Shayiragul Levakar is Kala Avelim Vachilim Shabikilu Lahevdil Dargo Maimed. Eiger was makbid to visit every single person who was sick in the Kehila. Doesn't matter what their stature was, if they were wealthy, if they were poor. He would visit everybody in the Kehila. Okay, then he would have a mincha with tefillin. So he would come home before Shkiyat to have mincha with tefillin. Then he would have another shir in Magen Avram for the Balabatim. Then Ma'ariv he would have with those same Balabatim. He would say Meshaberach for the Cholim. And at the end of the day, he gets a few hours to himself to learn. At the end of the day, and then he goes to sleep. He gets a few hours to learn at the end of the day, and he goes to sleep. So, interesting, Rabbi Eiger does not have a ton of learning time in his day. By the time he's done with all his responsibilities, this is in the second half of his life, when he's a Rav in Posen, which was a big city. And he's a Rav Machuz, he had to control a lot of areas. Rabbi Eiger is very busy. He's very, very busy learning, teaching. He's saying 3 shiurim a day, 2 for Balabatim, 1 for not Balabatim. He's doing Bezdin and Tzarchi Tzibur. He's doing Bikkur Cholim. He's spending a little time with his family. He has a very, very busy, full schedule. And the part that I want to focus on is that in this retelling of Rabbi Eiger's lifetime, it sounds like even in the end of his life in Posen, he would dedicate real, serious amounts of time out of his day to do Bikkur Cholim every day. Now, this is a shmooze, a bit of a discussion. If Rabbi Eiger did this, if he didn't do this, if he didn't, why didn't he? And I wanted to break that down a little bit. Now, just to start this properly, let's start with the mitzvah of Bikkur Cholim for a minute. And then we'll get to Rabbi Eiger's personal anhaga and how it may have changed over his lifetime. Now, the Chafetz Chaim in Avas Chesed, in Chelik Gimel Parak Gimel, Chafetz Chaim brings like an overview of the mitzvah of Bikkur Cholim. The Chafetz Chaim in these outside, other svarim besides Jerusalem, Chafetz Chaim, beautiful Musar de Kisvarim that bring from all the sources and everything. The Chafetz Chaim brings up here. Before we go into the Gemara or whatever, he just describes so intensely. I think today Bikkur Cholim is a little bit looked at as like a bonus mitzvah. Because nobody's in that bad shape usually. People are usually if they're sick, they're in the hospital, they have, if you live in this country, Baruch Hashem came out without exception, you have world-class care, right? Even you have insurance, you don't have insurance, whatever it is, but no one's, but I want to read you how the Chafetz Chaim describes like the need for Bikkur Cholim, and then try to copy paste that to Rabbi Eiger's dar. He says, "B'aveinisenu Rabbi ha'olam mekilim b'mitzvah zu shel Bikkur Cholim." He says, "The Welt," the Chafetz Chaim says, is mekel in this mitzvah. B'fratam ha'chayil hu ani, especially if the chayil is an ani v'le'yadati time. He says, I don't know the reason. Yimisham chiyuva, if it's because of the chiyav mitzvah, halei b'vadei ha'chiyav hu afilu ba'asher v'chol shechem ba'ani. The chiyav is by an asher and also for sure by an ani. Here is this guy. The kishani chayla ve'en adam bala bakrei. When an ani is sick and no one comes to visit him, this could easily be something that's pikuach nefesh mamash. A poor person doesn't have the proper foods that he needs for his illness. He has no idea how to go about helping himself and healing himself and taking care of it. He doesn't even have many money to call a doctor. Sometimes he can't afford it. He can't afford to buy medicines that he needs. In the wintertime, the bone-chilling cold is setting into his house. Coupled with the deep anxiety that he's feeling because he's laying on his bed over here for several days. And there's no one who even opened his door to check on him and to give him life, to give him sustenance. All these things, they weaken his strength and they weaken his resolve and they strengthen his illness. This is the Chafetz Chaim goes on like this for a while about like painting the picture of the terrible state that a chayla ani finds himself in and the need for Bikkur Cholim. Then the Chafetz Chaim actually goes and he says that he's heard of in some kehilas, and this is it's interesting with this, who started the first Bikkur Cholim before Satmar, before Skver, who started the first Bikkur Cholim in the world. So the Chafetz Chaim mentions that I've heard of some cities that have a chevra kedosha, not kadisha, a chevra kedosha. That's the Bikkur Cholim, and they take turns, and everyone takes a shift being V'vaka Chayla. And then he says they even have a chabura b'shem Lina Satzedek, which means they take turns sleeping over by people's bedsides when they're sick. Meaning, so they're doing all the Bikkur Cholim things, and he talks about how you pay the dues for it, and who's responsible for it, and who takes shifts. So it's just interesting that Bikkur Cholim of a variety existed in those days already. Now, this is the Chafetz Chaim describing the great need for Bikkur Cholim. Now, Chazal in the Gemara Nedarim dedicate almost a blot of Gemara to describe the importance and the chshivas of Bikkur Cholim. And I want to just read a few of the famous Gemaras over there. The Gemara in Lametes Amud Beis in Nedarim says as follows: Amar Shlakish, Remes the Bikkur Cholim in Atar Minayin. Where do we have a Remes of Bikkur Cholim? Shenemar im Kamois Kalad Musa Neilu Pkudis Kalad V'Gomer Mai Mashma Ravam Kamois Kalad Musa. The Gemara brings a whole drush of it, and then the Gemara goes off into a different area. But Shlakish brings Remez l'Bikkur Cholim in Torah. Now the truth is that if you look in the Torah, there's no pasuk that says a mitzvah deraisa Bikkur Cholim. So is Bikkur Cholim mitzvah deraisa? The Rabbanon? Is it a Hanhaga Taiva? So it's a big machlekes Rishonim. Many Rishonim. The bulk of Rishonim seem to hold that Bikkur Cholim is a chelik, is like a sniff of Gemilas Chesed, which is a mitzvah deraisa. The particular mitzvah Bikkur Cholim is midrabanan. The Rabbanon said, Chazal said, a type of Gemilas Chesed that's important to do is Bikkur Cholim, but most Rishonim hold it's not deraisa. There are Rishonim that hold it is deraisa. This Gemara l'chera, when it says Remez l'Bikkur Cholim and Atayra, is mashma that it's not mamash deraisa. Now the Gemara over here continues and it brings a bakanta thing. The Gemara says like this: Ma'aseh b'talmud echad mitalmidei Rabbi Akiva. There's a story with one of Talmidim Rabbi Akiva. Shechala, he was sick. Now, this is rather, it's a good harbinger for Rabbi Akiva Eiger's own anhaga. It's Rabbi Akiva, the first Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva Shechala, one of his Talmidim got sick. The Chacham didn't go into him Rabbi Akiva went in to visit him. And because Rabbi Eiger Rabbi Akiva cleaned and prepared and cleaned up the house and straightened out the house for this person, he gave him life. Amalei, so he tells him, the Talmud says, Rabbi Hichiyasani, you gave me life. Yatzer Rabbi Akiva v'darash. Rabbi Akiva left the house and he said, I just realized something over here. Rabbi Akiva left with the Havana that the Chafetz Chaim laid down so beautifully in Navas Chesed. He left and I see people are neglecting this mitzvah and it's a big important mitzvah. Yatzer Rabbi Akiva v'darash. Kol mi she'einu mevakir cholim kilu sheifach damim. Anybody who's not mevakir cholim is kilu sheifach damim. Now, this din that Rabbi Akiva darshan, kilu sheifach damim, so the Rashi or whatever the Mefarish over here says, because when a person gets visitors, they take care of the things they need to be taken care of. Other Rishonim explain that when a person, and the Gemara really is Mefarish like this later on, when a person does Bikkur Cholim, he sees the difficult state that the Cholim finds himself in and he davens for him. He goes in and he sees and he davens for him. The Gemara, because of that, says that a person's not supposed to come in the first 3 hours of the day or the last 3 hours of the day. Bikkur Cholim is supposed to happen in the afternoon. Because the first 3 hours, like Rabbi Eiger did it, because in the first 3 hours of the day, everyone looks all right. You go and almost everyone looks like they're doing good. It's like, oh, you're doing good today, and you're not going to be motivated to daven with the person. In the last 3 hours, everybody looks bad. At the end of a long day, every chayil looks very sick, and you're also going to be knocking down. You're like, it's a goner. There's no reason to. I'm not getting too invested in this tzvek. And because of that, the Gemara says he's supposed to come in the middle of the day, not in the beginning, not in the end. So these are the two times that are given. Now, this din that Rabbi Akiva says. That Rabbi Akiva says kol mi she'einu mevakar chayil kilo shefach damim is gepaskint in Rambam and Shulchan Aruch. That's a din in Shulchan Aruch. Rabbi Akiva's drasha that he's supposed to be mevakar chayil, and that's like if you don't, it's kilo shefach damim is a din in Shulchan Aruch. Now the question is, who's supposed to be mevakar chayil? Chavetz Chaim talks about making rotations and shifts and whatever. And we presume that the people on those shifts were Baalei Chesed, Oiskim B'tzarchei Tzibur, people with energy, some free time who are doing it. But let's say, is there Shiva supposed to go Mevakar Chayla? Is the Rav supposed to be Mevakar Chayla? Are Kohelim Galites supposed to join the Bikkur Chaylim? Or is there different lanes? Like there's people who, there's the Gemilas Chesed lane and there's the Torah lane. And now, if you look at this Gemara face value, the Gemara sounds like Rabbi Akiva himself, right? It says, the Chum weren't being Vakar, Rabbi Akiva went, he was Vakar, he cleaned, he did, and everyone was good. Now, Mitzat Sheni, from the Gemara itself, you see that none of the other Chachamim came, right? Meaning there's a Talmud Echad who was Chayla, the Chachamim didn't come because it wasn't their job, and the ones who were neglecting it, L'chayr, were just the Hamaynam, who should have been taking care of it. And Rabbi Akiva darshan that if you don't come to Mevakar Chayla, you'll shevach damim. And Rabbi Akiva himself was like a Hayrasha, like some sort of exceptional action that Rabbi Akiva took because he realized like that the stakes are very high. Meaning, what do you take out of this Gemara? Now the truth is, there's a very interesting Avester of Nasan that tells over a story, and I want to read it for you. And there's a lot of different ways to understand the Avester of Nasan, and based on that is to answer the Shaila. The Avester of Nasan says like this. It's in Parak Mem Aleph. It says as follows: Have a amul b'divrei Torah v'altasasik b'divrei betela. Be very stark amul in divrei Torah and don't be misasik in dvarim betela. Ma'aser Reb Shimon ben Yochai. It's Taka Bashat. We're not talking about Lag Ba'omer. Ma'aser Reb Shimon ben Yochai. The story with Reb Shimon ben Yochai. Shay mevaker es hacholim. He was mevaker the sick people. Umatza adam echad shetafuach umuta b'cholim yayim. He found a person who was very laid up with cholim yayim. Va'amar gidufim lefnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And this person, when Reb Shimon ben Yochai walked in, was cursing out HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He was saying, why this happened to me? I don't deserve this. Hashem is just punishing the wrong guy. This type of stuff. Amr Loi, Reb Shimon ben Yochai tells him, Reika, you empty person. You should be davening to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and begging for Rachmanis, and you're cursing him out. You're in the wrong mode over here. So Amr Loi, this person didn't take the Musa lightly. This person turns to Reb Shimon ben Yochai and he says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu yistalkenu mimeni v'yenichu alecha. Yeah, Azai, Hashem should take it from me and put it on you. You give me Musa shmuzin about my illness, so you take my illness. This is the story that says. So just listen to Reb Shimon ben Yochai's response. Amar Loi, Reb Shimon ben Yochai says back to him, Yafa asali HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hashem did to me, Reb Shimon ben Yochai, to Rash be good that I got cursed now. She'enachti divrei Torah v'yisi misasik b'dvarim b'telim. Because I left divrei Torah as being geisik in dvarim b'telim. So Reb Shimon ben Yochai, not only does he not get upset, and we know from the Gemara in Shabbos that chutzpah to Reb Shimon ben Yochai was not really tolerated. That could be a death sentence. Reb Shimon ben Yochai says, yeah, you're right. I deserve this curse. I deserve the curse that you gave to me because I shouldn't be here. I was hinachti divrei Torah v'masasik b'dvarim b'telim. So now, what are you supposed to take out of this? What's the pshat? What's the pasha pshat in this Avester of Nasan? So there's a lot of different versions. Now, I just want to go like in order, we'll go in chronological order. The Binyan Yeshua, I think, who's the first Mefarish in Avester of Nasan. I think he comes first. He says, even though Reb Shimon ben Yochai has been Mevakar Chayla, which is from the biggest portions of Gemilas Chasadim, Kedisa min Adarim, it's not a davar batal, like the Gemara in Adarim, Daf Mem, Daf Aleph, Daf Lamates. This Gemara describes the great cheshivas of the mitzvah. V'lav davar batal, mikol makayim. Nishna Dem, Reb Shimon ben Yochai is a Talmud of Rabbi Akiva, so he knew, how important this mitzvah was. It's a big mitzvah. It's the Gemilas Chassid. Mikol makayim Talmud Torah keneged kulam. Talmud Torah supersedes it. Rajbi terasayim nasei hayek kedisa perikam the Shabbos. Al mission of Sigan Likar Shman. The Gemara in Shabbos in the beginning in the Gemara in Shabbos in the first parak tells us that Reb Shimon ben Yochai was terasayim nasei. He reached the highest madrega of dedication and commitment to Torah, and for him, this is not the mitzvah for him. Meaning the way the Binyan Yeshua on the Avester of Nasan is learning is Reb Shimon ben Yochai took the Muslim and said, you're right, I'm in the wrong lane. It's a mitzvah, it's Bikkur Cholim, it's Gemilas Chesed. Someone else should be doing that. I'm Terasei Nasi. I'm supposed to be in Mismedrash learning. This is someone else's department. The Yavitz, Rabbi Akiva in his Hagoyis on Avester of Nasan, whose yard site actually was just also. He says his 250th yard site was just recently. He says as follows. He says, what was the vart that Reb Shimon ben Yochai was giving himself muster about? He says, "Hayisi misasik b'dvarim b'telim nichta b'tzidei she'avar ha'mashenemer ba'azne ksil al tadaber ki boiz l'sachal milecha." He says, what Reb Shimon ben Yochai was over on is giving muster to someone who's not in a state to hear it. giving mussar to someone who's not ready to hear it, who's not in the right matziv, you're not supposed to give mussar to them. And the Gemara in Eiger says, "Yisur mavir noisem idaitai das kainai." And the Gemara in Basra says, "Ein adam nitvas al tzairoi raya meiov." He says he brings a whole peckle of rayas that you're not supposed to be busy being menachem someone and telling him what the right or wrong thing is when he's in a down matziv. And B, he says Chazal even seem to cut a guy slack when he talks poorly about HaKadosh Baruch Hu when he's in a desperate situation. Chazal say the Yisurim mavir noisem idaitai. He's not in his right mind. Don't hold it against him when a person talks to you. It says Reakvem l'kein ha'yidiver techachasei la'ani hadas am esgoyla b'dmei Yisurim nechshavim dvarim b'teilim vader. Hashem ben Chai was saying, I wasted my time. I'm doing dvarim b'teilim by giving the mussar. So Vader the Bikkur Cholim was not dvarim b'teilim. That's Gemilas Chesed that he had to do. That was a mitzvah that he's supposed to be doing. But giving the mussar, that was already the wrong stance to take. And that's what Shimon Chai took was giving himself mussar for. Both of these versions. So one of them sounds like Terase B'naseh, not supposed to be there. The second version is going more like the Deya. That Shimon Chai belongs doing Bikkur Cholim. The Eiger sounds like he belongs doing Bikkur Cholim. He just shouldn't be giving mussar. Now, in the Sefer Chassidim, which is, I think, the only Rishon that discusses this, the Sefer Chassidim in Siman Taftaf Reish Daled, it's like a little bit of a cryptic Sefer Chassidim, and Rabbi Margalis and his Hagayis on the bottom is Mefalpul. He brings two different Girsayis, which is the Chayr Italians, Machlekes Netzafal. It says, Achayla, Keshachachamim Vakar Naisai, Bekashalem, Shemvatman Min HaMitzvahs, U Midivri Torah Bavure. Achayla, when the Chachamim come to Mivakar, and it's hard for them, because they're taking off time from their busy schedule of mitzvahs and learning. Ksiv Ashri Maskal Aldol, he brings a medrash, I guess, that says a story of there was a person who was a Talmid Chacham, he sat and learned. But he knew a certain market better than anybody else. He was the best, procurer of diamonds, whatever it is. So Bikish Mena Almana Achas Liknes LaOysa Chayfetz. And an Almana came, she knocks on his door and she says, could you take off from your learning and go procure me this thing so I can make some money on it? The Heishiv, he answered, how can I'm doing what I'm set out to do. I'm learning over here. Amalei Zakin Echad, Loi Toivatim Rav Gamliel, Rav Yeshua, Shahochu Liknes Behemel Mishtas B'nai. Afata Kashat Telech, Tahar B'divrei Torah, V'yitnu L'cha B'zoil, Ukilu Nasatim Yedechala, V'zchus Tirchach Yishal L'cha Abayra. So he says, you also, don't be so high and mighty. You should think and learning while you're doing it. You memorize some Mishnayos, thinking and learning. Go do the shopping for her, you'll save her the money, and it'll be as if you gave her your own pocket, and the schus will be good for you. The schus, Zali Beishtein. That's what it says. So it sounds like from the Sefer Chassidim, the Sefer Chassidim is saying, now it's cryptic, he starts off saying, it sounds like negative. Like the Chacham will come and they're wasting their time for the mitzvah and the Torah, but then he just leans right into epis and medrash that seems to say, don't be so high and mighty, take off time and do the mitzvah. Now, Rabbi Margalis shtelzach on this sort of steer in the Sefer Chassidim. He brings that there's other girsayos, other versions, and basically it comes down to machlekes and neschayos. If the Sefer Chassidim holds that a Talmid Chacham is supposed to or not supposed to be doing Bikkur Cholim. Yir Shia, it seems in Shulchan Aruch and in the Rambam, if you look, it doesn't say anywhere that a Talmid Chacham is pater from Bikkur Cholim. Maybe there's a Sushal Hashavas Aveda, which is also Gemilas Chesed, and over there there's a din of Zakim V'Einel V'Choydei, so maybe there's also Zakim V'Einel V'Choydei, but the truth is that it's really not Einel V'Choydei of anybody to do Bikkur Cholim. It's very bakavidik to do Bikkur Cholim. It doesn't require you climbing into some, Zakim V'Einel V'Choydei is if it's Einel V'Choydei, to go schlep a lost cow through the street, a Rebbe, or a Sheshiva, a Bezdin, go schlepping through the street with a cow, that looks funny, but to go to Ani's house and knock at the door and visit him and sit with him a little, that's not, what's the... we know obviously from Rashi and Chumash and from Chazal that HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself was Mevakar Cholim, and when we say Mahu Racham, Afatah Racham, Mahu Mevakar Cholim, Afatah Mevakar Cholim, meaning so it's not an Elfi and Pashta says that a Talmid Chacham is Mechoyim Bikkur Cholim also. Now, and Rabbi Eiger Taka, like we started off with, Rabbi Eiger was highly involved and invested in being Mevakar Cholim. Now the truth is that there were some Gedolim who it seems had an Indian of not being Mevakar Cholim. It's gebracht, and I'm really quoting a lot from an article by Rabbi Yisrael down the Ravitz. It's stam. I just want to name the source of it because most of what I'm talking about he highlights. But the Shlomo Karliner and others, it seems, had an Indian to not be Mevakar Cholim. Rabbi Eiger writes about his grandfather Rabbi Eiger that when he got older, as he aged, he stopped being Mevakar Cholim. And Rabbi writes, incidentally, and seemingly it's coming off this obviously Rabbi Nassan, Rabbi Eiger writes that his grandfather had a hard time listening to the chirufim v'gidufim that were coming out of people's mouth. Eventually Rabbi Eiger couldn't tolerate listening to all the chirufim v'gidufim, and he stopped being Mevakar Cholim. Now, there's a strange memra that's brought down. This is what Shlomo Kalina said. He says, "L'chein ein mevakar sachelim k'fi aroi, v'umenei asatz mektas mizeh, m'rishein bi'acholte lizbol geis v'esnas sachelim." He can't tolerate the gaiva and the haughtiness of the chelim. Now this is it's a very strange take, because generally you go to chelim, they're pretty broken. We're not talking about someone who has stubbed his toe. A chelim who's really sick, who's ben achayim ben amavis, and he doesn't know which way he's heading, and there's no guarantees. Is usually pretty broken, unless they're on very good drugs. When they're on good drugs, so then they can be, like, you're not getting gaiva is not the first midah that you would think you'd encounter when you meet a chayla. Now, so the people talk about it. They try to explain different things. I don't know. Could be gaiva just means not accepting the din and being mecharef megadef like the Avos Reb Nasan. What's interesting is that incidentally the Arizal is Gebrach L'Shem the Arizal, and this is a little connected but a little different. The Arizal says she'eni chayil lamed b'dal dama shel chayil shekam mitasei. I can't stand in the Dal Ramas of a Chayil who survived and got out of it. Who survived. Why? That guy's about gaiva. Why? While he was on his sickbed, everyone came in and told him nice things. They were nice to him. They complimented him. They gave him chizik. And now he survived, so he believes it all. It's like a chassan after Shev brachas. You can't go near this guy. He's like, he comes out, his head's full of all the compliments that everyone told him. And you know who came to the Nasi, the Rosh Hakul, and the Rav, and this one came, and this one told me this, and then, like, this guy can't. So this, the Arizal said. So this is, it's similar but different to what Rav Shlomo Kalina is saying, but it's not exactly the same thing. Now some say that Eiger, as he got older, stopped doing Bikkur Cholim. Now there's a very interesting discussion that's brought down. It seems that Eiger, when he got old, and this probably just has to do with age and being busy, the job in Posen was a big job. He had his hands full, like we know his schedule was saying shir, he was doing, he had a lot to be busy with. It seems that Eiger, in his last years, would send a shliach around every day. He would send a messenger around every day to inquire on the status of each chayla, and he would monitor them like doing rounds, but virtual rounds. It was telehealth. He would send someone around to collect rounds of all the chaylim. Now, the shaila is, and this is a nidin that came up at a chasana and led to a big discussion, is it possible to do shlichos on Bikkur Cholim? Bikkur Cholim is l'chayra a mitzvah shebegufay. That's aleph. You have to do the Bikkur Cholim. Now, it could be that if you zilbas a time, and the reasons for Bikkur Cholim are to daven for him or to inquire to make sure he has what he needs. So if you send the shliach and you follow up and you do what needs to be done, it could be you could do it. Maybe we could put that aside. But the real problem is that the shliach himself is mechayiv in Bikkur Cholim. If you look in the Gemara in the Darm and it says gepasst in the Shulchan Aruch, Bikkur Cholim the Gemara says afilu meya pam bayayim. Now, don't take that to heart. Most people don't want to be visited 100 times a day by the same person. But I feel meya pam bayayim. You can do Bikkur Cholim. And some of Rabbi Eiger's talmidim who write about him, there's a whole collection of what they write that Rabbi Eiger would sometimes visit the same chayil 2-3 times a day. If he thought that person, it was meaningful to that person, he would come 2-3 times a day. So, the chayil of Bikkur Cholim is ein lo shir. It has no, you can't check it off the list and do it and then it's done. How could the shliach ever do it for you? He has to do it for himself. Every time the shliach walks into the room, he's mechayiv in Bikkur Cholim. He's a Jew like anybody else. He's mechayiv in Bikkur Cholim like anybody else. He walks and he's doing his Eiger in the midst of Bikkur Cholim. How is it possible for him to transfer that token to Rabbi Eiger? How do you do Bikkur Cholim b'shlichus? Now, this is something interesting. It's brought down a few different places, but again, Rabbi Dan the Rav brings it down very nicely. That by Rabbi Lezer Gordon tells the Rav's chasana. So this is like late 1800s, probably late 1800s. Lezer Gordon's chasana at the table. There was different Rabbanim sitting there, and the Mechaber, the Pardes Yemainim, who was the Rav in Kovna, whose name escapes me the second, was sitting at the table, and he said, they were talking about Chasanas and Batchanas and Kol Masameach Chasam V'Kala, and he said, my minig is, before the Batchan goes into the wedding, I'm a Shatav V'Pruta. I give him $1, and now I make him a shliach, and he should be my shliach also to do Batchanas, and like that, I'm Yoitza Kol Masameach. He says, I'm better at, tiny Hagayos and Hilchos Nida, not that great at making jokes, so I'm a shtatef in this Batchan's jokes, and like that, I get my mitzvah, I do the thing. And he says that the chassan, Rabbi Lezer Gordon, was sitting at the chassan dish over there. Rabbi Lezer Gordon pipes up and he says, B'mchilas kveitcha, the Rav of Kovna, I don't understand how you could do that. You can't make a shliach. Kol Masameach is ein l'shir. As much, Kol Masameach, as much as it is. So the Batchan goes, it's his Eigen mitzvah. You can't have any. He didn't run out that he could give you any. He's still doing his own mitzvah. How could he give you any of it? It's not possible. And at the chasana, like a big debate started, and the Aderes' twin brother was at the chasana. Aderes was a twin. His twin brother was at the wedding. His brother's name was maybe Reb David. I think he's Eliyahu David. So his brother's name was, I forgot his name. He had a twin brother. They actually wrote a sefer together for the bar mitzvah. A goyin, his brother was also a goyin, not as known as the Aderes. The Aderes, occupied, first of all, bigger positions. He was a Rav of big cities and moved to Yerushalayim. He was also a prolific Mechaber Svarim. A lot of his stuff is still not even published today. Still in Kisvei, like that's how much he wrote. But the Adaris' brother was sitting at the Chasana, and he jumped into the conversation. He participated in the conversation. He says, my brother answered, and he says, Kai Gavna Nimtza betold us Eiger Eiger. He says, my brother knew the story that Eiger used to send the shliach. Shabbos Keinusa yem shliach levakar Cholim. Verigam Bikkur Cholim in lashir. Imkein makim Eiger zatzal. Ba'achar Chenu kishum mechaven ba'ad acher. Imkein havelei kemoy mechaven shleilotzes de'ena yotze. His brother said, Vaistois, that when you have in mind that someone else to be a shliach for someone else, it's as if you're being mechaven shleilotzes. Now we know by mitzvahs, even mitzvahs shliach is gavana, ein shliach is gavana, but if you're mechaven lahed, you're not to be yotze the mitzvah, then you're not yotze. He says, so the Batchan goes, and Act 1 is lishma for himself. Act 2, he says, I don't want to be yotze the mitzvah of Mesameach Chasam Makal anymore. And now that's, for the Rav of Kavna's account. And likewise, Eiger would tell the shliach, go be b'akachayli, yotze a little bit, and then the second 5 minutes, that's for me. This is what the Adaris' brother said. Now the Adaris himself doesn't love this. He says, V'li pashat hadavar the adrabah. Hoyel ve'ein shir l'simcha me'le shapi yishlem b'dechoshe kvar simeh chachasan af ma'at yotze b'kach. He says the whole kasha doesn't start. The Adaris' brother said, you're telling me it's ein lo shir, so I can't have a shliach v'ker. It's ein lo shir, I can be yotze in 1 second. Everything after that is extra credit. I can of course give it to someone else. Now, as I got to need them, because there's a Arzarua by Chazmila, and the Ramah brings it down, there's Darkei Moshe. This is like a whole tumult. If it's possible, and Adaris brings, I think, 3 terutzim I don't think it's even published. This where he wrote this. Mitzvah, one day it will be. He brings a few terutzim, and I have a sefer over here called the Baisid Bakun. It's about Rabbi Eiger's pandemic activities, which is what we'll get to next week in Mitzvah Hashem. And in there he has like nispachim, like Shikl Torah. In the end, he has Shikl Torah about this. He brings the Dvar Avram and others. It's like a cute tumult about if it's Shayach Shliach by all these types of mitzvahs, by Mila, by Bat Chanas, by Bikkur Cholim, etc. Yich Shir, Rabbi Eiger himself, clearly for a large portion of his life, felt the mitzvah Bikkur Cholim was a uber important mitzvah, worthy of his time and energy, and we know how valuable that was. Could be b'seif yamav, he stopped either for reasons that are musker and avos nasin, or reasons that like similar to Shlomo Kaliner, or he never really stopped and he was always doing it like shliach, and leads to this question. Now Mitzvah will continue with some of his particular psakim relating to the pandemic. Interesting machlekes about him in the Chasam Sofer about COVID minyanim. Mitzvah will to be continued.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.